Welcome everybody to BIA CEO webinar. Thank you for joining. My plan for today is to run through this agenda. Transparency and where we've got to with the EU court case, how to use the patent box. We had a useful discussion in Cambridge recently. Update on some lobbying matters, what's gone on in the Queen's speech, which came out yesterday, where we're at with the early access proposals from the government, what's going on with the Biomedical Catalyst Fund, and an update on our events going forward. So obviously a key thing for the BIA has been influencing the clinical trials transparency debate, and I suppose in simple terms what we've been doing is we've provided a briefing on the European Commission proposals for clinical trial regulation, something that we've campaigned for a couple of years. That's available to members. We've also made sure that we've had BIA members on the advisory groups to the European Medicines Agency on access to clinical trial data, and those groups have now finished, and the EMA has recently, in the last couple of weeks, published its report on what's gone on in those groups. It's now at the stage where it's going to go away and have a think about how it comes forward with its proposals on this, and we would expect to see them, I think, next month with a consultation likely to run through to September. So in a sense, we've been around that debate once already, and it will be interesting to see where that's going. And we've, of course, also responded to the House of Commons Science and Technology Select Committee inquiry into clinical trials and disclosure of data. So these are the things that we've been involved in, and I think, you know, the transparency debate is obviously something that's very hot in the sector at the moment, and I hope you can see we've been engaged in the right way. I'd advise you to look at the Commission's briefing, our briefing on the Commission's regulation, which is available on the website. I thought it might be worth just taking a moment to explain what the BIA expects members to do in terms of transparency. And at the simplest level, the BIA expects members to endorse the 2009 so-called joint position, which was agreed by all the international trade associations a few years ago, which encourages people to, expects people to publish the results of all clinical trials in patients conducted on medicinal product that has been approved for marketing and is commercially available in at least one country. That's what should be made public, and that should be done no later than 1 year after the first approval, first approved and commercially available country. Now, this, in a sense, is nothing different from that which is in the ABPI code, which companies who market drugs in the UK are expected to comply with. And their new announcement was that they were having a new mechanism to enforce that. So I don't think this is anything difficult or challenging to member companies who are already in the commercial space. And for pre-revenue companies or discovery companies, there's nothing in this that they need to worry too much about, because obviously it only kicks in if you've got commercially available product, which for many pre-revenue biotechs isn't applicable. However, I think it's fair to say that we all need to get ready for the fact that this is likely to change, and these groups, FPA being the European head body of the pharmaceutical associations, are reviewing their joint position, and it's likely to change. I'd expect that to change not this year, but probably next year, and we just need to be aware of what's going on with that. And as that becomes clear, I'll expect to update members more closely. Why do we worry about this when most of our members are pre-revenue and doing early stage trials? Well, I think this is probably the core reason, which is that EU guidance and existing legislation is going to say that a summary report of all phases of trials will need to be published from 2014 on the system that's used through regulatory approaches to be transparent. And for the first time, I think this means that earlier stage companies need to be aware and engage in this process. And this means that reporting of trials prior to marketing authorization will come into the public domain. I think at this stage, it's one that we just need people to be aware of, and that's why I'm flagging it, particularly for those companies for whom this hasn't been an issue, because it's not been part of their business process hitherto. So that's what I'd say it's important for us to just be aware of as we go into the coming months, and we'll provide future briefings on this as we go forward. One thing that's happened in this month that I think is important to understand is there was a court injunction last week around the release of drug trial data. This was an EU court, and a court case was brought about whether they were right to, under sort of freedom of information legislation at the European level, to give that information to others who had asked for it under a right to view information. The court accepted that there was a case to be put here, and there will now be two defining court cases centering around two companies, AbbVie and Interview, which will decide the balance of what it is that goes into the public domain from information that's gone through a regulator. And this is likely to be a defining process over the next 6 months, which could set the backdrop to future discussions about what should and shouldn't be disclosed. Obviously, those campaigning for full transparency weren't delighted by this outcome, and there's been some media reporting of it in the UK. But I think it's important to see that this is where this is going. Europa Bio, the organisation we're a member of, and FPA, the Pharma Association at a European level, have filed what's called friend of the court briefs around this, and they are likely to make the case as to the impact this could have on the sector. And obviously how this comes out would have a potential impact on how much companies and IP is worth and what they're able to patent. So that's why, and what becomes into public domain through dossiers. So that's why this is important. Broadly, this is we'll watch and advise, be aware that this is going on in the background. And if you want my concern, I suppose it's that some of the other things that we've been batting for in the regulatory space, for instance, the reform to the European Clinical Trials Regulation, may not happen as a result of focus being put somewhere else. That's fine. So, moving on to some other subjects. Patent Box is up and running, as you know, for the last couple of months. We had a great event in Cambridge last week with many member companies engaging, and some great experts both from the IP world and the tax world coming together to help us work out how to get the most out of it. So thank you for your engagement and insight there. I think we're at the stage now about making sure that this works for you as members and works for your companies. Just really 2 points. Because Patent Box is about your corporation's tax treatment, think through your patent strategy now, because even if patenting only covers a small part of your business, it may well be valuable. And that was one of the lessons I drew from the event we had last week. Second, I think everybody is in a learning process because this is the first year of operation. So if you're thinking of doing this, discuss with the HMRC your approach to your tax return before you put it in with regard to this, because there are likely to be some nuances that need to be thought through, and questions that haven't been put. So rather than go with a case that you expect just fill in the form and send it off, it may be worth, if there's things that you're unsure about, HMRC may not have come across before with regard to this treatment. So early discussion with your with HMRC on this is the other piece of advice that came from that meeting. And I think this is one we're keen to watch. So if you've got experience of this, please feedback on it, and I'm keen to make sure that we can close that loop. We've got some good networks as to how we can make that happen, and keen to make this work for you all. Another issue we've been campaigning on, of course, is the early access scheme. We're still awaiting publication of the Department of Health's response to the proposals for an early access scheme. There was a good discussion last month at the MHRA expert group on which I sit with Alan Morrison, who chairs our Regulatory Affairs Committee. And we've started a discussion with NHS England, the new organisation established this financial year, used to be called the Commissioning Board, on the practicalities and funding arrangements around an early access scheme, because obviously this will fall into their bailiwick as well. So some practical progress here. I'm expecting that their documents from the Department of Health will become public before the summer, and when that happens and we've got something meaty to discuss, we'll call a meeting rapidly to engage people as to what this means and where we should go from this. Those of you who followed this debate will know the linkage or delinkage between the adaptive licensing approaches that are being mooted at a regulatory level and the early access schemes. And just in passing, one of the things at BIO that wasn't very well attended was a discussion on adaptive licensing. It didn't feel as if this had permeated the body of the biotech sector, certainly in the US, and wasn't something that was being focused on. I think early access is something we can do within the UK and is worth continued engagement on. adaptive licensing was a little bit quiet in BIO in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. As you know, we follow what goes on in Westminster, and the Queen's speech, the day when the government set out their legislative agenda for the coming year, was yesterday. I've done a quick analysis as to the 20 or so bills that were mooted and looked at what matters to companies in the life science sector. And if I can do this very, very quickly and on one slide, perhaps the way to think about this is there are 3 bills that matter to the sector. One draft bill, which is going to be published but not tabled for discussion, that may be of importance, and there's something that's not in the Queen's speech, but is going to be have legislative time that perhaps also merits a watch. So the bills that matter, I think, are the Intellectual Property Bill, which sets up the Unified Patent Court, something we've long advocated and should be a boon to the sector with the Life Science Court coming to London. So that's a good move for the UK and our colleagues in IP. The Care Bill is one to watch because it's, as well as setting out the deal-not proposals about how you fund adult social care in England, it also will be the legislative vehicle to set up the HRA, the Health Research Authority, and there is talk from the discussion at the House of Commons Science Select Committee that this could become the vehicle through which, if there was an endeavour to enforce transparency requirements in a UK basis on clinical trials in the UK, this would be the legislative vehicle that I think transparency campaigners, both outside the House of Commons and within the House of Commons, may look to table amendments to bring that into being at a UK level. So I think for us, it's watch that one to see what others do with it, rather than seeing it as core to moving the sector forward. The National Insurance Contributions Bill also is the legislative vehicle that gives UK businesses £2,000 off the NI that they pay if they employ people. So not big money, but maybe important for some of our smaller members. There's also a draft deregulation bill mooted where there will be a discussion of deregulation proposed that is endeavoured to be a business-friendly measure. Again, I don't think this will change very much in the coming 12 or 18 months, but it may be a debate that we can engage in, and there may be things that can be lobbied for in that space. Finally, I always think that although the highlights of the legislative agenda come out of the Queen's speech, some of the things that matter are hidden somewhat in the technical statutory instruments that go through, and one that I'm watching with particular interest is the UK implementation of the EU directive on the application of patients' rights in cross-border healthcare. Not because I'm thinking of getting my hip done on a trip to Germany, although that's what the bulk of this is about, but because there are some technical pieces within this that may matter to us. There's some definitions around rare diseases and how rare disease cooperation may work across borders, and also some definitional issues around biosimilarity. So the outflow of a piece of European legislation into the UK legislature may well be happening, and that's one that we'll also be keeping an eye on. Biomedical Catalyst remains an important issue for us, and as you know, the spending review is happening late June for government. I think it's expected that Department for Business is likely to see further cuts. As you're probably aware, the BMC business-led, the Biomedical Catalyst business-led fourth round at the moment is postponed, and we're aware that a significant amount of their money for 3 years has already been allocated, or could well be allocated by the time at the end of the third round. So we think this is important for the sector, and we've launched a campaign to refill the Biomedical Catalyst with some funding year on year. We've engaged members and non-members in this. We've inspired some people to ask parliamentary questions. It's great to see many of you engaging through the letter writing campaign to lobby your own MP as well as the Treasury and other parts of government. And we've sent some letters to key MPs whose constituencies are particularly affected by this. So we're on the case on this one, and please do get involved, because I think it's probably the single biggest piece of policy that's made a difference to early stage life science companies, and we're very keen to make sure that there's a sustainable version of this. If I can just, in closing, turn to some upcoming BIA events. We've got a Women in Biotech event in London in a couple of weeks' time, and then I hope we'll see many of you at the BIA MHRA Joint Conference on the 5th of June. I think it's really a great time to understand some of these developments in adaptive licensing, early access, the rules that they exist at present that do have a degree of flexibility in them that it's important to understand as you think through your regulatory pathway, the innovation office that they've set up at the MHRA, and the tricks of the trade as to how to best engage with and approach the regulators. I hope we can get from a time-efficient one-day conference. I'm also keen to engage with people around R&D tax credits in the coming weeks. The 20th of June, we've got a curry night in London, and that should be a good event too. And not too far away now from our CEO and Investor Forum aimed at the C-suite executive. I think that's going to be a really good event with some great case studies from people who've really made things move this year, as well as Patrick Lahayan of J&J, giving us an insight into how they view Europe and why they've picked London and the UK as the base for their place to work from. Finally, the Bioscience Forum on the 10th of October, I hope is in your diary. A great event last year, and we look forward to seeing you then. So, looking at the panel, I don't see that anybody's got any questions online. I'll see if there's anything that anybody's got that they want to vocally argue. If not, thank you very much. Appreciate your attendance, and look forward to seeing you next month. Many thanks.